I hope America doesn't get too upset with me when she sees the show title for this episode.
Hey, poor! Hey, poor! Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is headed this way as soon as I said his name. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and he's cat. Get over it. This is a new show episode, and yes, America will be joining us shortly. As usual, a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First big piece of news is that I did hear back from Shelley Segal, and we're trying to work out a way to do the interview. She's offered, if you can believe it, to give me a ride to her show. I've explained to her that it's about a 40-minute drive to get here from Nashville, and that I really need to be able to get to work the following day. So we'll see how it goes, but for her to offer to pick me up is, I think you'll agree, pretty goddamn awesome. So far, I've managed to keep the pneumonia at bay. I get tired really easy, which is why I haven't posted the Patreon-only episode yet, as I just haven't had the energy to do the editing required for it once I've gotten home from work. I will get it out this week, however, as I've gotten most of the editing done, and I should be able to have it up by Thursday at the latest. To make up for this, I'll be putting out a second Patreon-only episode this month as well. America and I talked for 4 hours when we recorded this episode, so I've got plenty of material for it. Got to pick fewer stories for these episodes. I also need to thank Andy from the O'Reilly Radio podcast for his contribution to my Help Me Keep a Roof Over My Head and Get a Car fund. It's a big help. I'll have a link in the show notes if you'd like to contribute as well. This episode's going to start out a bit weird because when America and I first started talking, I brought up the story about the woman in Atlanta who caught flack for the outfits she wore to her job at an elementary school. We had planned to have a larger discussion about it later in the episode, but never got around to it. I think, however, that what we say in the beginning does cover the issue pretty well. There's no mention of either the bombings in New York or New Jersey or the nutter with the knife in Minnesota because those stories broke while we were recording and we didn't see anything about them. As of this recording, there's no information about who was behind the bombings, and an ISIS-connected group is claiming some involvement with the mall attack. And with that, here we go. And one thing I didn't put it in the show notes because I didn't remember it when I was working on it, and I don't know if it's something you want to talk about or not. But you saw that article that Chris Watson posted about the teacher everybody's butthurt about because her outfit?
Yes, I did see that.
Do you want to talk about that or not?
Sure, we can talk about that one.
I mean, I wouldn't call her outfit inappropriate for her job. It's a little different than what I would expect, but it's certainly professional looking.
Right, and I feel like there are a number of factors involved because the very next day I saw another woman in a very similar outfit, and she was very much pear-shaped, where she was all like hips and button thighs. Mm-hmm. So in the same dress, it was rather loose up top, but then very tight around like her hips and butt. And I've started following the same woman on Instagram, and she's through her own fitness. And I'm not sure if her breasts are natural or not, but that's none of my business. That's just her body. Mm-hmm. And so unless she wears what you call a shift dress, that's kind of this, it's like a sack that just goes straight down with sleeves. Unless she wears that all the time, that's just how she's going to look in everything.
Yeah.
Because her hips are much wider than her waist, and her waist is much smaller than her chest. And, like, she's just going to look like Betty Boop in fucking everything she wears.
Well, and she's an attractive woman. She knows she's an attractive woman, and she wants to present herself in the best possible light.
Right.
And, I mean, it's... Excuse me. It's not like she's wearing something that's low cut, that's showing, that's cut down to her belly button or something like that.
Right. I mean, the dress, I believe, went to her knees, or at least pretty damn close. But
yeah, it's just above the knee, kinda. Like an eighth of an inch or something, insanely small. So. It's, I don't know if it's so much her skin color that upsets people as it is they just have a problem with, women looking attractive, knowing that they look attractive, and flaunting it without being slutty.
Right. And I really do have to say that I feel like most of this is a problem because she then involved her work. Because she has lots of other photos and videos of her, and she's super, super hot, and everybody knows that. And there were surprisingly few photos of her at her job, but unfortunately the one, like, the dress that she wore another time to also go out clubbing. So it gives a bad impression, and now she's involved her school, where it turns out she's actually not a teacher. They call her a paraprofessional, which means that she's either like an administrator or an aide, which kind of makes a difference because now you're involving a teacher's classroom to make yourself internet famous.
Yeah.
So...
But, I don't even know how that anybody picked up on that and made a big deal out of it because, it doesn't seem like, it's not like they spotted her on the news and were appalled.
Right. No, it kind of blew up because some, like, NFL player or something tweeted about how hot she was because he found her Instagram. And the photo that he tweeted was of her in the classroom. And then it just sort of, like, exploded from there. Because I guess women can't ever be sexual beings and look sexy. I don't know. I've had this conversation with somebody else in one of the TGIA groups. She got really upset at, like, coworkers' dress and just... in a way that I was really kind of shocked about, because I assume all women are feminists, especially if they're atheists, and I don't know why I assume that. And in a very not, like, pro-woman way, she was just furious at her coworker's choice of wardrobe. And I tried to find out if it was just, like, because she's wearing it at work, but she just seemed mad that her coworker would wear the outfit, period, which just sort of blew me away.
Yeah, somebody who replied when Chris posted that article, somebody replied with about the same attitude that, well, it's just totally inappropriate. It's totally inappropriate. And, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't see anything inappropriate about it at all. It's...
Right.
And like you said, with her figure, anything she wears is pretty much going to look like that on her, unless it's a burqa.
Right. That's just, she's kind of fucked. It's like women, one of my doctors one of the doctors that I know at a hospital I used to work at, she has very large breasts. She's a very, very petite woman, with very large breasts. And there's nothing this woman can wear to minimize that. She just has large breasts, and unless she wears a burqa like this woman, there's nothing you can do about that. And she wears, a nice shirt under a blazer, but unless she wears a full turtleneck, sometimes there's cleavage. And I really kind of like that. I don't think she's ever gotten flack for it, or if she has, it's not been a big deal, because she's a beautiful woman and I really like her, and she's incredibly, incredibly intelligent. And I would hate that people would, she's also a blonde with like gray eyes or something. So I would hope that no one would ever mistake this woman for not being the intelligent, capable human being that she is, just because she happens to be very slim with large breasts.
Sounds sort of kind of like Miss Ashley from No Religion Required. She's like 4'11" or right at 5 foot, and her breasts stick out almost as far as she is tall.
Right.
And that's just the way nature worked in her case, and you can't help but notice them because with her build, she struggles to do things because they're so large and she's so small. If she was, taller, it wouldn't
be right.
Yeah.
This is a fantasy business, Reverend. You can have any truth you want.
And so can you. Isn't that why you're here?
Isn't that why you are?
So our first story comes from the independent.co.uk. Pope Francis announces day of prayer for survivors of clerical sex abuse. The Catholic Church has confirmed its plan to hold a worldwide day of prayer for victims of sexual abuse as it continues to make efforts to protect vulnerable children. Pope Francis announced the proposal following a meeting of the panel he set up to tackle child abuse within the church and help survivors of past attacks. The church also plans to establish an educational website with information and advice.
If you see a man in a priest outfit coming towards you, run, kids, run!
Right, pretty much. And, they're saying that the day of prayer was suggested by an abuse survivor and could be one part of the healing process for survivors and the community of believers. And I don't understand how that's possible, because the very last thing that I want to do is know that the people that molested of me have me back in their thoughts. Just... Ew, I can't. Why don't we just jail them? I feel like jail actions are better than thoughts and prayers. Holy shit. Could you do anything more useless than pray? Dear Jesus, please help me not rape kids.
More like, dear Jesus, please don't let those kids squeal to the police.
Right.
Or, dear Jesus, please don't let the government take away our money because we sheltered abusive priests for centuries.
Right. I want to keep my huge house in Chicago. There's that huge, diocese house that sits in the middle of Chicago on, 2 acres or something stupid.
There was an article in some paper a couple of years ago that had the houses of various Catholic officials in the U.S. And these guys ain't living the mendicant life, I'll tell you that. I mean, I grew up, well, I didn't really grow up there, but, my dad, after my parents divorced, he bought a nice house in a very nice neighborhood. I've dated women who lived in very, very nice neighborhoods. And, none of their places compared to what these guys are living in. One of them, who he's like a cardinal or a bishop in Florida. has, this very nice house with it might be beachfront property, I'm not sure, but it definitely has a big old pool in the backyard with a nice tiki bar. And he's got his own little pool boy who lives there full time.
I think that's the article I found this out from, because the one in Chicago, the people that were taking care of his house were all nuns. And you don't have to pay them because I guess if it was considered an archdiocese home or whatever they call them, it's part of their duty. So they're getting paid to be maids in this asshole's mansion.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we're thinking of the same article, that it's like a 3-story house in Chicago.
Right.
And it's an old house too. It's not like a new one. It's an old one, which would add to the value of the place.
Right.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
This comes from HurriyetDailyNews.com, which is a Turkish website, I believe. Ancient seeds to be resurrected. Wheat and sesame seeds dating back 2,800 years ago that were taken from an excavation in an ancient castle in the eastern Van province will soon be brought back to life. And then apparently they dug these out of some grain storage place that they found that was still slightly intact in the ruins of a castle, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. Looks like Zvetstubet Castle, but I'm sure that's wrong. And it's a Uartian king who lived in that castle, which I don't even know what a Uartian is.
I don't know either.
But I just find this cool because, a lot of all the plants we have today aren't what they were way back when, but there's oftentimes rather surprising dramatic differences between, the crops that we have today and the crops they had way back then. And the other thing is that those, if they can get these seeds to germinate and do a DNA sequence on them, they may find that they have genes that are helpful for things that current crops don't have.
I think that would be great, because I'm all about, although in this apartment it's not working, when I garden I tend to prefer heirloom seeds, and things like that. So I would really, really love to increase the genetic diversity of our plants and foods and stuff like that. Because I will admit that is one of the things that I understand when people complain about GMOs, that, our tomatoes now, there are, of course, like 40 varieties of tomatoes. Everything you get in the grocery store is like shit.
Yeah, and actually there's only...
And I keep...
I was going to say there's only like 3 varieties that you can actually get in the average grocery store anymore.
Right. And avocados, which I love beyond all reason. Haas, I guess, is the one, it is a breed of avocado, and it's the one that everyone thinks of. And now we're only down to maybe a handful of avocado varieties. So if something happens to avocados, God forbid, we could be fucked, because there's a lot of diversity. And I will happily sacrifice the souls of a kindergarten class to prevent anything happening to my avocados.
Well, we're having that problem with bananas now.
Right.
Because there's one kind of banana that we use, and there's a mold that's attacking those bananas, and we don't know what to do about it. And I don't know about you because you're... Well, I mean, my parents were in their 30s when I was born, so, my parents were fairly old for people having kids at that time. And like, both my grandparents on my mother's side of the family were born before the turn of the century. And they all complain that bananas we get today don't taste as good as the ones they had when they were younger. And it's not them, waxing waxing nostalgic about a fictional past. Back when they were younger, there was a different variety of bananas that were more flavorful, and they started, they got hit by a mold, and they had to rapidly find a new variety, which is the one we've got now that's endangered, and this new variety doesn't taste as good. And somebody figured out that the reason why, there's, in cartoons, there's the gag of people throwing a banana peel out and somebody slipping on it.
Right.
Well, that older variety of bananas had a much slipperier peel than modern bananas do.
Oh, so that's a relevant joke if we still had the old bananas.
Right. And apparently, like, if you get, say, banana-flavored gum, the flavors in that are based on the old banana, not on new bananas. That's why they taste so different than, bananas do. The gum tastes so different than the bananas you get in the store. And the same is true of strawberries. Apparently, when strawberries weren't bred to be just big, they had a larger, they had a greater flavor, and the flavor in strawberry candies is closer to the strawberry flavor from back then than it is strawberries now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because strawberries also taste like shit.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a company called Seeds of Change?
That seems familiar, but I'm not sure why.
They only sell heirloom seeds.
Okay. That makes sense.
They're actually a pretty neat company. They claim they have people sending them varieties of plants, seeds that, it's like, well, I don't know what kind of tomato or whatever this is, but my grandmother's been growing them for years in the backyard, and, I can't grow nothing where I live, and I don't want it to die out, so here.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
All systems go. Prepare for countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's off to adventure in the amazing year 400 billion with Commander Horse and his faithful companion Cadet City as they roam the endless uncharted regions of space at speed so fantastic they level the imagination. Prepare to surge to sublight speed.
This comes from Gizmodo.com. We finally know what this big red splotch on Pluto's moon is. As soon as Pluto's moon Charon came into view, we had a question. What's that big red splotch on top of it? Now we finally have an answer. A new paper out in Nature looks at data from NASA's New Horizon mission to Pluto to come up with a solution to the mystery. It turns out that although the color is on Charon, it's really methane from Pluto that's turning Charon red. When methane escapes from Pluto, some of that gas gets caught in the atmosphere of its near moon, Charon. Because of Charon's long orbit, its poles alternate between century-long periods of non-stop sun and non-stop dark. So, I guess the dark side would be pointing towards Pluto, because Charon is almost the same size as Pluto and they have a really weird orbit. We've never seen anything like the orbit that Charon has around Pluto, because they don't actually orbit each other. They orbit the same spot in space, if that makes sense.
That does. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But the thing that gets me, and the article doesn't mention, is most of the time when you have methane gas, it's a byproduct of biology. It's not a naturally forming gas, usually. It does form naturally under certain circumstances. But the bulk of it we know of on Earth is because of, microorganisms breaking down plant matter and producing methane.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'm not enough of anybody to have any kind of clue as to how it could form naturally and be produced in enough volume to create that red spot. But, I could not possibly imagine there being some kind of life on Pluto, but now you have to leave that door open.
Tucker, there has to be life on Pluto. I'm totally telling you, it's like life on Mars. It's going to happen. There are aliens. We just haven't seen the movie yet. Yeah. The first one with Ice Cube, great. That totally explains it. And now we'll just have one for life on Pluto. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm so sorry. That was the dumbest joke ever.
What movie with Ice Cube?
Oh, gosh. And now I feel bad because I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's one of my favorites. It was like oh gosh, what was the name of this movie? It's alright, I'll think of it in a second.
Was it Sphere?
No. Ghost on Mars. That's what it was. Oh. Ghost on Mars.
No, I haven't seen that one. I've seen parts of Sphere, and I don't know if he was in that or not. For some reason, I'm thinking he was. I haven't seen too many movies with Ice Cube in them for whatever reason, so.
He's not in very good movies, so that's not a bad thing.
There was somebody, I forget who it was, but there was an actor that they were, everybody, whenever this actor was announced that they were going to be cast in a movie, everybody was like, well, it's going to suck. Whatever hopes they had for that movie, as soon as they heard that so-and-so was cast in it, they were like, nope, it's going to suck. There's no point watching it. And it wasn't one of those things like, well, I know he's usually in bad movies, but there's still a chance that they could get this right. It's like, nope, no argument. If he's in it, it's bad. And I can't remember who it is because it's somebody who, was well known. But it's like, there used to be a division of Disney called Hollywood Pictures.
Really?
Yeah. Back in the 80s, Disney decided they wanted to do something besides kids' movies, so they created a couple of divisions, and their idea was that they would release kids' movies under the Disney brand, and then they would have movies that were more family, that were aimed at older family members under, like, Touchstone, and then the, adult edgy movies would be released under Hollywood Pictures. And, the logo for Hollywood Pictures was the Sphinx, and the story became, if it's the Sphinx, it stinks, because every one of their movies was awful, just about.
Oh, no!
Yeah, and they eventually shut it down because they realized we can't do this very well. And I think they bought somebody to make up for it. To replace Hollywood Pictures. They bought some other studio that was making the kind of movies they wanted to make. But
I do remember Hollywood Pictures. I saw one. Everybody has seen one of their movies.
Mm-hmm.
Arachnophobia. They did Arachnophobia with David Arquette because his sister just died.
Yeah.
Alexis. And they did The Sixth Sense.
Could be.
I can't believe I forgot about them. Wow. Tucker, you have all this, great quiz knowledge.
If I could only find a practical use for it.
We'll figure it out.
Okay, and I need to play a promo here for a streamathon that I'm actually going to be on next Saturday. 4 o'clock Mountain Time, I think, is when I'm going to be on there. I don't remember. All the details haven't been finalized as of yet, so can't give them to you yet, but here's the promo for it.
The Atheist Nomads are hosting a 12-hour streamathon from 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. Mountain on Saturday, September 24, 2016, to raise money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's Light the Night Walk. Dustin is walking for his mom, who survived Hodgkin's lymphoma nearly 35 years ago, and Lauren is walking for her uncle, who was lost to leukemia, and aunt to lymphoma. Both are walking as part of the Treasure Valley Coalition of Reason team. The funds raised will be going to help patients pay for the ridiculously expensive treatments. Go to atheistnomads.com/live for more details and links to where you can donate. And yes, there will be a drinking game.
Tea, Earl Grey, hot.
Our next story is from Core 77. Airbus 3D printed an electric motorcycle that looks like an alien. So I don't think it looks like an alien. I think it just looks like a motorcycle frame that is very light. So it is a traditional motorcycle frame, but like the 3D printed cast they have, it is missing a lot of the sort of unnecessary components. It's very minimalist. It looks a little bit like the inverse of the chambers of an anthill. So there are beams for structure. There's a beam over what looks like the engine compartment. There are beams under the seats. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to it, which I'm sure is wonderful if you race bikes. It's got to cut down the weight a whole lot. So it is a concept bike made by aerospace engineers. It was 3D printed motorcycle. And this bike was developed and executed by an Airbus subsidiary to show the structural offerings of their cutting-edge 3D metal printing and additive methods. It's made from the company's fictional-sounding material Scalmalloy, which is nearly as strong as titanium and resistant to corroding. So it looks amazing. It looks, like any other motorbike. It gets up to 80 kilometers in seconds, and it can last about 60 kilometers on a single battery charge. And it's only 35 kilometers or 77 pounds. So even though it says it's not a racing bike, I'm sure you could expand this up to racing bikes or just start making racing bike frames in this manner, because I'm sure every pound would help for them.
Well, yeah.
And it seems rather small. They have a photo of a gentleman on it, and he's looks like average male height, let's say 5'10", 5'11", and it looks like something that perhaps I would put more like a young teen on. It seems a little small.
Yeah. It does seem a little small. And I've never heard what the figure is for cars or land vehicles, but I know for aircraft, every pound of weight they can shave off of them adds 750 feet that they can travel on a
Oh, that's amazing.
tank of fuel. Yeah, so I'm sure it's probably more for, a ground-based vehicle, since at least part of what the energy a plane is expending is keeping it in the air, Yeah. And then part of it's used to get it through the, air in the direction you want. Whereas, a ground vehicle doesn't have to expend any energy to keep it on the ground. It just, but, it's an interesting concept, and I would say it was probably like not the Model T, but like Henry Ford's first car as far as 3D printed motorcycles go. It proves the concept, and it'll give people ideas, and they'll start playing with it. And who knows what they'll come up with. I mean, you've heard about the kids' hands that they replaced, with 3D printed prosthetic hands.
Yes!
And rather than just giving the kid, a 5-fingered hand, they're now making them look like, characters from Marvel, from comic books or Disney movies.
Right. He got Iron Man, the little boy that I saw, had and Robert Downey Jr. presented it to him.
Yeah, there's all kinds of arms like that. I mean, I know they've got like Captain America, Iron Man, some other Marvel character you can get their hand like that, and then Disney's got, you can get like Elsa from Frozen. You can get her hand if you're somebody who wants that. And I'm like, I don't really use my left hand that much.
Well, if you're not chopping off your hand.
But I mean, if I had to have a prosthetic hand, getting one that looked like Iron Man's,
right?
That's forget one that's fleshy and looks like my hand. I want one that looks like Iron Man's.
True. I'm hoping for bionic parts one day. One of my favorite book series, she is this super badass, bionic, awesome babe. I am willing to lose my eyes if I got bionic eyes, because they suck and they continue to get worse every year.
Tell me about it. I'm in bifocals, so.
Oh, Tucker.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Although, here's a question for you. Let's say we get prosthetics that are indistinguishable both visually and tactilely from the limbs they're replacing. So, not only would it look like you had your natural arm, even though it was an artificial arm, but to you and anyone else who touched it, it would be like touching your flesh and blood arm. Okay, we're at that level of technology, right?
Okay.
Would you have your genitals replaced with those if something went wrong with yours?
Yes. Even if it didn't look the same. If it felt the same and for some reason it had to be like metal gray, sure. And I get a vagina that, could clamp down and remove a man's penis. Yeah, fucking awesome.
See, I don't know. I mean, granted, it would be kind of weird to have, the body of a 20, a vigorous 25-year-old with an 80 or 90-year-old man's dick stuck on it. But it's like, I kind of want to keep that wiener. I know you say that the replacement will, I won't be able to tell the difference after it's installed, but I'm not sure if that's an upgrade I want to go to.
Tucker, you just haven't seen enough penises to know that they're all really unattractive and weird looking. So I've never seen a 90-year-old man's penis, but I have seen some young men with some incredibly wrinkly genitals. And you're fine. It would be hot. I'd bang you, Tucker. It'd be fun.
I remember reading an article about a guy who had a botched penis enhancement surgery.
Oh, no.
And not only did he have problems getting erect or having sex because it was, it was like difficult for him to get an erection sometimes because of the damage from the surgery. Sex could be painful for him, but also apparently his dick looked weird. In fact, he claimed, how true it is or not, I don't know, he claimed that women, they were getting ready to get their freak on, and women looked at it and said, that's just weird. I can't do this.
That wouldn't surprise me. Depending on scar tissue, it could look absolutely terrifying for somebody. I knew a guy that, and this is why I'm totally against circumcision, had a botched circumcision as a kid and could get erection, but it was apparently incredibly painful because it was just so tight for him, and it didn't heal right. So Oh, God, that poor guy.
That sounds weird, because there is a legitimate medical condition which people don't usually discover until the person's a teenager, where the foreskin doesn't, when a guy gets hard, the foreskin is too tight around his dick, and they have to cut it off and circumcise him. Otherwise, he can't have an erection and actually have sex. It's just, like you get so far and it just like strangles your dick, and then, you're screwed. And that sort of sounds like what he had, but, if he was circumcised, then that would have fixed it, but obviously there's something else going on there.
Right.
But yeah, Louis the 16th supposedly had that problem.
Really?
Yeah. And, of course, since they don't discover it when you're a kid, until you're a teenager, you have to have the surgery when you're a teenager. And apparently, even with modern medicine, it's still not very comfortable recovering from it. There was something I heard. You know how they say, everybody praises Kenyan runners.
Right.
Well, apparently, the theory is that the reason Kenyans are such good runners is because they wait until they're teenagers to circumcise the men, and they do it the good old-fashioned way, knife, no anesthetic, and it's considered a sign of weakness if you express pain at any point, either during the procedure or during the recovery. So they all...
That sounds horrible in so many ways.
Yeah.
God. Kind of not on that. The article I read had more to do with altitude, that them running, and then it being a lifelong thing. But, oh God.
Yeah, the piece I heard on him, they were talking to some Olympic Kenyan runner, and I don't remember his name. Not that I would know any Olympic athlete's name, really, to begin with. And he said that he felt that it was the fact that he wasn't allowed to express pain or suffering during and after the circumcision that enabled him to be the runner, because you didn't worry about, well, my leg kind of hurts, I need to slow down or stop. You just kept going. But he said that, when it came time for his son to be circumcised, which I don't know how old his kid was, but it was, several years off, he was going to have it done in a hospital with anesthesia and all that. Which you can argue about, that being a terrible thing, but at least the kid's going to be knocked out while it goes on and get all the pain meds he wants while he's recovering.
Oh, I can't. Oh, God. There's something about... I wish we would just stop circumcising everybody. It's horrible. It is always horrible and is absolutely unnecessary. I don't know how we got from 3D printed motorcycles to circumcised dicks. How do we do this every time, Tucker?
I have no idea. I'll have to listen to the recording to figure that one out.
Oh, God. Okay. Let's go to the next.
She blinded me with silence.
This tortoise had so much sex that he saved his entire species. And is it just me, or does that tortoise have a shit-eating grin on his face in the picture?
He knows.
I mean, I don't know who, how they managed to get that photo, but boy, he's proud. As he should be.
Right, he's into species.
Yeah, several animals have gone extinct in the last decade, including the Baiji dolphin, which was killed by the Three Gorges Dam in China. I don't know if you know that or not.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Three Gorges Dam, which is like the world's largest dam, and I mean, it's huge. It would, like, if we built it in the U.S., the length of the dam itself would run like 3 states. You know, obviously not Texas, but, you know, like 3 Midwestern states, and it flooded a massive area. And it really pisses me off, too, because there were a lot of historical artifacts that got buried under the reservoir that lake created. But anyways, the Spix's macaw, which I'd never heard of, the Liverpool pigeon, and the West African black rhino. Those were all gone extinct. One animal which has been pulled back from extinction, however, is a species of Galapagos giant tortoise, thanks to the sexual exploits of just one male. Diego is over 100 years old, which means he's like a teenager, and is for tortoises, and has fathered some 800 offspring. Which, I mean, A, it's really cool that they were able to save the species. B, that is one lucky fucking tortoise. No pun intended.
Right.
But,
sorry, I was laughing. I'm not sure why that joke was so funny for me. Keep going.
But I just think it's neat. You know, I love stories like this where they manage to save a species, and, you know, it's kind of appropriate that they did it with the Galapagos tortoise, since Galapagos is where Darwin got his ideas about species, you know, evolution, and really that's the moment when advanced science began, because Darwin was so methodical in proving his theory that he taught scientists in other fields, well, this is how you establish a theory as being real. Don't just go off a supposition and build from there. Actually do highly detailed work. And, you know, and it sort of expanded from there. I mean, he wasn't the first person to do that, but it just seems like when he did that, the whole process of science began to explode because of how methodically detailed he was.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, he spent like 20 years working on the origin of species. I don't know if it was quite 20 years, but it was a very long time. And he exhaustively documented everything and was very precise and detailed, and it really shifted a mindset in biology and the other sciences, because, you know, not only did it say, hey, humans are animals like any other species on the planet, but it also, you know, showed, well, this is how you compile evidence, this is how you test your theory, and things like that. Because I know he tested, or, you know, parts of his theory by breeding racing pigeons. And he also tested parts of his theory on human development by studying primates. Him and his wife actually brought a baby, I don't know if it was a monkey or a gorilla or what, but it was, you know, some kind of primate, into the house, and you know, he studied how it reacted to certain things, and then he went into another room where one of his infant daughters was, and did the same things with her to see how she reacted. And he compared and said, yeah, you know, the baby, we'll say it was a chimp. The baby chimp reacted this way. My daughter, who is the same age, reacted the same way to keys being jangled over the crib or whatever. I mean, he like played music for insects to see if they would respond to it. All kinds of different things to try and figure out what was going on. And how, you know, to prove his theory. So.
And people, think that it's all a lie and that none of that is real.
Well,
I wish people would try and go story by story in the fucking Bible and do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he, if people aren't willing to read the Bible, how can they be expected to read something like The Origin of Species?
Right.
But, of course, they're more than happy to tell you, well, you just need to read your Bible. Yeah. Like you've read it, motherfucker.
Right, and I did read it, and it doesn't make any sense to me, which is why we're trying to have this discussion, but oh no.
Yeah.
Springtime for Hitler and Germany. Winter for Poland and France.
This comes from the new civilrightsmovement.com. Trump tells his supporters Clinton's bodyguards should disarm. Let's see what happens with her. And, do I really need to read past the headline? Because that's not the first time he said something like that, and it's not the first time somebody said that about a sitting president. I know people talked about doing that with Obama, if not Clinton. I don't think anybody ever said that about George or Reagan. But, yeah, because Trump is like, she wants to destroy your Second Amendment. I think what we should do, she goes around with armed bodyguards like you have never seen before. I think that her bodyguards should drop all weapons. Yeah, and, as much as I didn't like W, the last thing I wanted was for him to get assassinated. And not merely because that would make Dick Cheney vice president, but, yeah. It's not how things should go.
Right, and this is the second time he's made that joke, and it stops being... It wasn't funny the first time, but I just... When is he going away?
Never, unfortunately, I'm afraid.
I don't understand how he hasn't violated some rule or some law or something, and someone's like, yeah, sorry, you can't run.
He's a rich white guy, so it doesn't matter. He gets to do whatever he wants.
Right.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. That's what, he can do that because he's rich and white. And he's a man. I mean, a woman could do some of the same things that he's done and get away with it, because certainly Ann Coulter does. But
yes.
She catches more flack for the crazy shit that she says than he says. And, that's certainly, at least part of it is due to the fact that, he's a white man and she's a woman, that he's able to get away with more stuff than she does without catching any flack. Because she says just the same kind of crazy shit that he does, if not crazier. Well, I'll say it is crazier on her part because she's more articulate and better educated than he is. But she at least catches flack from everybody over it.
Right. I mean, at the roast of Rob Lowe, that whole roast was about her. I mean, it was supposed to be about him, and I'm sure people were like, yeah, he got roasted. I saw it. I feel like most of that roast was about her. And even though I dislike her, it was... It's like when they, discuss Hillary. As much as I don't like her, I will admit the news is much more critical of Hillary, whereas they sort of treat Trump as like this dumb racist uncle. And that drives me fucking crazy.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that Ann Coulter is a vile human being, but I will readily admit that some of the attacks directed against her are unjustified and, are sexist.
Right.
Like comparing her to Skeletor.
Right.
That's one of the kinder things. There's or saying that she's a man because she has an Adam's apple. That's you'd never hear somebody calling Trump a woman.
Right.
even though his sister does have the same hair as him. Have you never seen pictures of her?
Oh no, I have. I have. Oh God. And now I don't want to be, mean and say that she's an unattractive woman because she looks so much like her brother. Jesus.
Well,
that family.
Yeah. Some time ago, the term to describe her would have been she's a handsome woman.
Didn't we? Isn't that how they described LBJ's wife? Was it LBJ? They used to describe somebody's wife like that because she was also his first cousin or something.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, that's some people are hideous. You just can't escape it. But other people are not unattractive, but they're not what you would call good looking.
Right.
And I would, and that's when they use the term handsome woman, was to describe someone who was not ugly but wasn't good looking, and they weren't somebody who could use makeup to make themselves appear beautiful. And, I mean, I because of her politics, I could never find Ann Coulter attractive, unlike Bill Maher, who apparently was dating her for a while.
What?
Yeah, they were dating. And it's just, and it's strictly her politics. I couldn't, I couldn't, there's no way I could do her. It wouldn't matter if it was a one-night stand or not. And I say that even though, like John McCain's daughter, she's gorgeous. I could have a relationship with her because she doesn't espouse the same kinds of vile stuff that Ann Coulter does. Not that McCain's daughter says, great things, but she doesn't have the level of evil, for lack of a better word, coming out of her mouth that Ann Coulter does. I mean, I think you could reason with John McCain's daughter. Ann Coulter, there's no hope in reasoning with her.
Do you think she really believes all that, or do you think it's like that Tommy person where maybe she's a bit of an asshole just to like be famous?
I don't know. I would suspect that I would consider it possible that she started out not believing it, but just saying it because it got her attention.
Right.
And then, but people in those situations who keep doing that kind of stuff eventually start to believe their own hype. And it does, it doesn't, that's an apolitical statement because that happens with anybody. I'm sure you probably know somebody who, spewed crazy stuff and you knew that they didn't really believe it, but after a while you could tell they started believing it.
Right. Yeah. I sadly let go of a friend who fell a little too deep into that, and I just couldn't. I wasn't pulling him out at all, and that made me sad.
Yeah. Well, flipping somebody like that is, you really have to. It's one of the, it's one of those things you have to. It's like judo. You can flip. A 90-pound woman can flip a 300-pound bodybuilder if she has just the right grip at just the right spot and knows just how to turn her body. But, anybody else is not going to be able to do it. And if you can't find those right spots on somebody, all you're going to be doing is tugging at them and they're just going to be laughing at you. So it's the best thing you can do is just sort of back away and hope they sort themselves out.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't thought about that person in forever. I miss him. Shit, he's probably voting for Trump.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.